welcome everyone to the Meshery development meeting. Today is 18th of August and we have some agenda lined up today. And if you have any other topics that you'd like to discuss, please add them to the meeting minutes. The link is in the chat. And also add your names down to the attendees list. And Lee will give away some prize to the most person who attends most meetings, and by the end of the year. And we have a couple of announcements before we start today's agenda. And if there is anyone else who is new on the call, who didn't get a chance to introduce yourself, please do that on the chat. We would love to hear about you and the areas that you are focused on as well. First up, we just released a new version of a GitHub action, the SMI conformance with Meshery GitHub. So some of you folks who are on this call have been working on this action, and we are in process of so this action is being adopted by one of the service mesh projects currently. So open service mesh is in the process of adopting this GitHub action, and yeah, we hope to that other service meshes also adopt this action. So that is on the roadmap and it will be done soon. You can check out this action here. The link is in the chat. And another topic is we are hosting a CNCF webinar on Meshery. So I believe it will go live on tomorrow. So you can RSVP using the link given in chat. And we will also have some more webinars coming down the road soon. One with CNCF students as well. So some of these are down the road. Moving on to topics. So this Sunday we had a bug hunting session for Meshery. So there were many people who joined the call and tested out Meshery, and we had a productive session where we identified a lot of bugs. So linked in the meeting minutes, you will find a doc for the test plan, Meshery's test plan for the next upcoming release, which is v0.6. So if you are interested in finding an area to contribute, or if you are looking to explore Meshery, like this test plan is a good place to start, because you will essentially walk through the entire Meshery lifecycle. So that is one place to get involved. And also we have raised a couple of open bugs. We have opened up a couple of issues for the bugs. So if you're interested in working on it, you can go to the link in chat. We are also proposing to conduct a follow-up session this week on Saturday, so 21st August at 9 a.m. Central Time and 7:30 IST. So that's the usual time and the time of this Meshery call. So we'll have some more bugs to hunt. So if you are interested, I'll send out an invite on the community calendar. So if you're interested, join that session as well. All right, moving on to Dhruv. Dhruv, do you want to talk about the static and dynamic boards?
Uh, hey, hello guys. So, mm, if you go through the attached link over there, you will be directed to our world famous Meshy architecture slides. And over there, this is an attempt to show how we fetch the charts in Meshery, both Grafana charts and Prometheus charts. I have demoed this previously too in the development call. Uh, so if you want to go into detail, then we can check out this particular site. I think what we wanted to discuss today was the readiness of the slide, so that we would show it in the next SMP meeting or Meshy meeting, if I'm not wrong. Lee, am I correct?
Yeah, this particular piece of functionality is of interest to not only to Meshery, but to the Service Mesh Performance project as well. There's a lot of metrics that are needed to be captured inside of the SMP spec, and without Prometheus node exporter, like just the most expeditious way to get at some of those metrics is through a Prometheus node exporter. And so, yeah, there's a biweekly SMP call that takes place. The next one is tomorrow. I owe Neha some amount of engagement and Dhruv this, like a recap, a refresher, if you will, of static boards and dynamic boards, boards being a collection of metrics, would be really a great like kickoff to the discussion, if that's what you said.
Mm, yeah, sure. I can give a brief about them. So
Yeah.
basically, there are two kind of modes in Mesh. One is dynamic mode, one is static mode. Now, what's the difference between them? So basically, dynamic modes are the one which you have defined, which you chain in Grafana itself, and we just fetch it from your Grafana instance and show it to you. So you are able to change it and do whatever you want with it. But then there are some statics board too. Now, what are the static board? Whenever we do a SMP test, we have defined certain things which we track while your test is going on as part of the result of your performance test which you do. So usually when you run a performance test, you will usually see a detail about each of the nodes which were present in your cluster, and a certain specs which are not over here. I think they should be okay. I will note that. Note to myself, anyways. Yeah. So basically, we capture that through the static boards which we have. So that's the difference. That's how we define static and dynamic board over here in Meshery. And usually the two slides which you see in front of you are give you a gist of flow on how we get the Grafana charts which are over there, and how we also get the Prometheus charts, and there's also some specific one for static charts itself. So usually for all the dynamics chart, whether it is from Grafana or Prometheus, we use the Grafana APK itself to get your charts, whether it's a Grafana charts or it uses Prometheus as a data source or not. But in case of the static charts, we directly take it from the Prometheus SDK itself, from your Prometheus instance, instead of going through the Grafana instance to the Prometheus as a data source. So that's the only difference between, that's the major difference between the static graphs and the dynamic graphs. That makes sense. Or
Yeah.
did I just blabber?
Yeah, this is great. And so is Neha on? Oh my goodness. She has been hot to trot on this. And so, by the way, that's a term that my wife really hates when I use. So it's good that she's not here, just FYI. So Neha's been raring to go on this particular area. And so we'll have to play back the recording because this will be helpful to her understanding. And it's not just her that we need to be involved in order to deliver this. But one further step, one piece of analysis that hopefully Neha can start on is I'll both state it and ask a question at the same time. So there's a collection of, there's some metrics that are defined with, that are of interest, and they're defined inside of the service mesh performance specification. These are metrics that if you want to characterize how well your service mesh, how well your workloads are performing, that you'd need to have these. And they are first class, kind of captured and defined inside that spec. The spec is, there's always more metrics to collect potentially. Like there's feedback on the spec that that additional metrics would be gathered. And so this initial task, this initial analysis that Neha and maybe others can do is to look at, and it's fairly readable, and Navendu or Drew or whomever is sharing it, you might be able to navigate to like the SMP site, to the SMP protos, and just give people a pointer as to where they can digest what metrics are specified as mandatory or specified as being captured by the spec today versus what metrics are being collected in the static board. There's a delta, I suspect. And that's part of the analysis that needs to be done. So I don't know who's sharing, but I can send you a link if you can't find it. You can go to the, yeah, there you go.
So I don't specifically know if they're defined over here or in Meshery. I know they are defined in Meshery. I'm not sure if they're defined over here.
Yeah, it's a little bit, and that's actually kind of the analysis to do. So under the spec folder, that long service mesh performance, yeah.
Oh, okay.
And so it's, and so this is why why it's good that you are bringing it up, because it's not, unless you have someone point it out, it's probably not the most obvious or the most legible. But within here, at some point, we'll start to see things about CPUs and memory. And are we looking? No, I'm sorry, this is the wrong. I'm sorry, it's under the, I pointed you wrong. It's under the protos folder, the service mesh performance proto. Yeah, there we go. So there's like the amount of traffic, the number of millicores, the amount of memory, the amount of memory for a proxy, the amount of memory for an ingress gateway, the amount of memory for an egress gateway. Like, hey, if you're going to analyze how well your mesh is running, those are, you want to know that. And it's not just that, it's additional metrics. So so I'll say it for the third time, I guess. The first step is to document the specific list of metrics that are collected by that are automatically collected by Meshery whenever it's connected to Grafana. I'm sorry, whenever it's connected to Prometheus. And so to explicitly list out those metric, what come as part of a static board, compare it to this, identify the delta. That's the first step. The second component to this is then when Prometheus isn't in the environment, what does Meshery do? How does it collect these metrics? Well, it doesn't, unless you provision a Prometheus. Okay, well, most of the service meshes come with a small instance of Prometheus embedded as like an optional deployment, because they too want to show metrics about how well they're performing. And so, but they also recognize that for the most part, anyone who has a production deployment of Kubernetes, like that, they're probably have already deployed Prometheus elsewhere. It's part of the status quo to have a Prometheus around. And so instead of deploying a new one that's specific to just the service mesh control plane, generally Meshery would look to connect to an existing Prometheus. Here's the challenge is that, well, when people stand up, like if some of you who are contributing to the project, you might stand up just a small cluster just to do development and check things out. And so you can separately deploy Prometheus, or perhaps you might want for Meshery to do that for you, especially with the configuration that Meshery would need. And that's part of that analysis is like, hey, what the node exporter, that there's different metrics exporters that you can deploy with Prometheus. The one that's of particular interest is the Prometheus node exporter. So as we send this to Neha for review, and if anyone else wants to assist here, this is a great DevOps-centric chunk of work. Take a look at the metrics that are available through Prometheus node exporter. Take a look at what's written in the spec here. Identify the delta.
Thanks, Drew. Thanks, Lee. Any other comments here? So those who would like to help out here can reach out in the Slack. Also, we will be looking at some of these in tomorrow's SMP call, so you can join that as well. Moving on to the next topic, Nitish, would you like to talk about your work on mesh sync?
Yeah, 1 second.
So do you have your system running? If you don't, we can come back to it.
Yeah, like give me some time. Like it's I'm having some problem with it, so I can do it later.
Sure.
Yep, that would work. So Ashish, you are up.
Okay, I'm sharing my screen.
Sure.
So before I share my screen, so a little bit about the unit tests. So we have covered almost all of the commands except two. So we have mesh command remaining and the version command. So anyone who wants to start contributing to Golang, so this is a very beginner friendly. You can write tests for the version command. It's very beginner friendly. If you run into any problem, you can hit Piyush or me or Suhani. Other than that, the second thing I wanted to, I'll just share my screen. Hold on a sec. Is my screen?
Yes, it is.
Okay, so actually I was having some connectivity issues today, so that's what that's why I was asking. So there is this function validate version, and it is being called in multiple functions. So it is being called in when we validate any context, this function is repeatedly called. So what happens due to this is this makes these API calls due to which we are exceeding the GitHub rate limiting whatever the threshold has been set by GitHub. So to avoid this, what I was proposing was to actually cache these versions in the .meshery folder. So we can have something like this. This is a test JSON. So we can have a versions field that specify all of the versions. So like I right now have latest version, and the metadata can be created at. This is a basically epoch timestamp. We can have this epoch timestamp that when was this last cached at, and the validity whether this particular version is valid or not, and then we can have a custom threshold. Right now it has been set to 1 hour. So what will happen is before making the API call, it will come here and check if the version is actually here, and if the version is here, whether it is valid or not, and if it is valid, whether it has crossed the threshold or not, and if all of the things are okay, then it returns true. Otherwise it returns false. So this is not Meshery CTL. This is just a demo file. So we have different functions like has valid cached version. This basically returns true if we can actually avoid the API call. And if we actually make the API call, after the API call is being made, we can actually add that version with this function. We can call add version and add that version here, so that for the next 1 hour, it wouldn't hit the GitHub API, and the same can be done for latest stable release tag. So yeah, that was it. So if anyone has any issues with it or any recommendation of how this JSON file should be made, or you can give your criticism or anything.
Just a doubt, how do you decide this validity thing?
Yeah, so basically I find the time dot now dot, basically the current Unix timestamp, and then subtract it from the created at. If it exceeds the threshold, it means that here you can see this. Basically, it's this line number 120. If I can just
Okay,
this line.
got it.
Yeah. So, as all of you think about this, well, it's been my experience that caches are a wonderful thing and often riddled with pitfalls of confusion around, why am I saying a certain thing? Why is it behaving like, oh, it's the cache, it's the cache, it's the cache. Very necessary, or very, depending upon the situation. And I guess the question is, and I'll think aloud with all of you for a moment, because if getting this wrong is, not good. On the CLI isn't the only place that Meshery calls out to GitHub. Anytime that you refresh this, I think, I guess just the dashboard maybe in Meshery UI, it also checks for the latest version. And so it doesn't take, you don't have to be too much of a power user to start to broach the limit, in part because anytime that you do a Meshery CTL start command, there may be any number of calls out. Now, Aditi is contemplating, or has contemplated, and so is Husseina. These two, I think in particular, given some thought toward, the term caching wasn't used before. Well, or yes, it was. But just the concerns around an air-gapped deployment. So outside of a rate limit, what happens if you don't have network connectivity to retrieve manifests or to pull down to check on the latest version? And well, I'll tell you what happens is Meshery CTL doesn't work. You can't use it. So you got to go off and find Helm or something else. Okay, and so hence these two ladies are giving that consideration as we think about a cache, both potentially for Meshery CLI and Meshery UI. Are there other than, so there's particulars about that need to be considered for how the cache would function, and it doesn't have to be super complex, but what could be done in lieu of a cache? Or there's some simple steps, and I think Piyush may have done this already, or someone might have already taken an initial step, and instead of querying GitHub's API for the latest Meshery version with every single Meshery CLI command, which is, in general, that would have been fine, but with the rate limit, so that's been reduced, I think, to just a couple of commands. So that reduction doesn't eliminate the problem, but it reduces it to a point where maybe it's not a problem. Maybe that's not the case for me. I hit the rate limit all day yesterday, all the day before. So do think about this, if you would. What else could be done if not for a cache, and if not for just reducing the number of times that it's called? There are other ways to authenticate. There's other ways to check for version number other than the API. You don't need to use the API to do that. What are we bundling into the package? So when Meshery CTL itself is downloaded, what all comes with that? How do we facilitate an air-gap deployment? Perhaps by bundling in some things into an initial download. I know that some of you have thought about this. You're probably politely being quiet. Does anyone think that iterating on a design for a cache is that we're starting off on the wrong foot, that we should be doing things before looking at a cache?
No, like considering the air gap deployment use case, I believe we are going the right direction. I believe Aditi will talk about some of it today, like we are caching the manifest files and using that. So that is one first step we are taking towards air gap deployment. And also like Ashish, your work seems like something that we should consider doing because um, the version check API call might be the most might be the leading cause for the reaching the rate limit. Uh, yep. Yes.
So Utkarsh asked, why do we need the valid field? Actually, we need because if user basically if we get some invalid version from the config.yaml, user is going to again and again hit the GitHub API for that invalid thing. So we also need to keep track whether that thing is valid or invalid. So if the valid field is set to true, it means that yes, it's valid. If it is not set to true, what will happen is we can also cache the invalid things. So maybe the user is going to he has made some typo or latest one or latest two or something that is some kind of invalid version. So I also need to cache the invalid version so that I can I don't have to go and hit the GitHub API to know whether that thing is valid or invalid. So I have two states in the cache, whether it's valid or invalid.
Invalid, maybe.
Okay, you go ahead.
No, please go ahead.
So I want to ask one thing. Why are we making the JSON file like this complex? We can keep it really simple. We can cache the version that is written in config YAML and store it there. And if it is updated, then we actually hit the API endpoint and update the JSON. Okay, something like that. Not making it this complex, keeping it really simple, caching only the things that are related to the version that has been written in config right now.
Sorry, I didn't quite get how are you, I mean, can you be more specific?
Okay, I'll try to explain what happens at the end is whenever we are actually trying to get any Meshery CTF, like something from config, we hit a like a function that is called validate version. Okay, and that is what the reason behind exceeding the GitHub limit. Okay, so my question, my point is, let's just cache the stuff that we want to kind of make sure of it only regarding the version that has been written in the config YAML. Let's say it is 0.5.1. Okay, so we are only caching it for 1 hour, and if it is like it was created 1 hour before and the version is still the same, okay, 0.5.0, we will kind of return the response from the cached part or confirm it that this is a valid version. If it is updated and it is not matching with the cache thing, we will create a new request to GitHub and update this JSON file and make it like it was created just now and it is valid for the next 1 hour. Getting it? I don't know if you got my point or not. Can you say something?
Yeah, I'm thinking about what you were saying. See, this thing is dynamic. I'm only caching what the version is specified in the config. I'm not the extra things that I don't know why it looks complicated to you. I mean, there are just two extra fields I also want to store the metadata about when this was created so that I can dynamically delete them every time the timestamp, every time basically the threshold is that particular version is expired. I'm not keeping it there. I'm deleting it dynamically. So that.
Okay.
So that
Okay.
JSON is not going to grow big and big. That JSON will just remain small.
Okay, cool. I was so like kind of concerned about it will be get clustered and a lot of things will be stored.
No. Every time you run validate version, if you will check for the, you will call that function check, basically the check function, it will actually delete it if it doesn't, if it has expired.
It will kind of completely delete the file and create a new one.
Not the file,
No, I mean
that
the
particular
data.
version.
The data.
Yeah, it will delete it.
Yeah, sure. Cool.
Ashish,
Design spec.
yeah. I was going to say let's iterate upon it with a spec, because a lot of people has a lot of suggestions here. So let's put it on a design spec. I can send you the link to create a design spec as well. Sounds good,
So
Ashish. Thank you for
will that design spec also contain one for the Meshery server?
Yeah, but you
Yep.
can, it doesn't mean that, you know, yeah, it's good to holistically give consideration as to how the system overall functions. It could also be that there's an alternative way of considering that is that if Meshery CLI as a client is concerned with it and, you know, to take steps to address either a rate limited API or a disconnected network, because these concerns kind of go hand in hand. So too, maybe should the other client, the UI, have similar concerns, and maybe it's lesser of a concern of Meshery server than it is the two clients. I don't know, but yes, it doesn't mean that they both have to be addressed at the same time. It's just that placing them both into the same design spec would.
So I added a doubt about the rate limiting thing. Like, so it is, I guess, Utkarsh knows the answer. I wanted to ask that slash API slash provider slash capabilities, right? Pings, uh, it pings Meshery cloud, but Meshery, does that also count as rate limiting when you use that particular endpoint to get the
Yes.
capabilities?
Yeah, it is actually rate limited, but on the cloud side, not on the server side. Definitely that can also be cached actually. Yeah, so we can do caching there, but that rate limiting is different from this one because the host are different.
Oh, okay. So should we cache in cloud too? Because like yesterday, that was the main reason why Meshmar was not able to, like we were not able to
Yep,
get the
yep.
latest package, right?
Yeah, we should.
Aditi, since you are going to talk about caching of manifests, would you like to show your recent PR?
Yes, give me a minute.
Yep.
So as you can see, earlier Kubernetes did not have a skip update flag. So the flag I have added attempts to skip update in the sense that it uses your cached manifests if possible. Now the conditions for using your cached manifest include in the Meshery deployment file, the version given should match with the config file. The operator manifest should be present, and so should the adapter manifests. If that is possible, it instead of re-downloading and then starting, you can see it just starts. If and this applies to the operator manifests as well. So earlier when this flag wasn't there, every time there would be a fresh download, and this is like one of the steps towards reducing our dependence on, you know, a net connection, like an air gap deployment. Um, so partly for Docker deployment, since they use operator manifests too, this extends to that as well. And the next thing I'm going to do is extend this to the Docker compose file as well. Yes, you can see using cached operator manifests. if you guys have any way I could improve this or anything, just let me know.
Lee has a comment like, is the proposal, will it take the version into account and store it in a structured folder, versioned folder structure? So
I didn't get your point, Lee.
Yeah, just there's so I'll give a quick analogy. In each of the Meshery adapters, they're being enhanced to provide better support for individual versions of each service mesh that they support. As they do that, they will, in their repository of each of the Meshery adapters, they'll have a pre-parsed collection of information about that specific version of that service mesh. And given that each service mesh has many publicly released versions, the file system of the source code for those adapters, it'll have one folder per service mesh version. And so the question is, hey, are we, as Meshery CTL deals with air-gapped considerations, and then potentially the user has resident on their local file system, any number of versions of manifests, how are we going to structure that? Is that just all in the same manifest folder? Are those files named differently? Are they structured into there's a design spec that needs to happen on this particular set of concerns. If you guys would, and Ashish, as you go to create this rate limiting design spec that more or less has very similar concerns and almost goes hand in hand with these air gap to concern, can you all search for the term air gapped or gapped in our community drive? There might be a design spec out there already that discuss it.
There is one by
I'll just share it in chat. Yeah.
Nice.
That's a good point. If I got what you said, Lee, once this PR is merged, I could start working on that.
Okay. Why do we need that PR merged first? To me, that sounds like coding before doing design.
No, I had a design spec for this. It didn't have this foldered version thing, but whatever I've done in the PR is in part of the design spec.
Got you. Okay. Nice. Yeah. The forcing the rest of us to review your design spec would be good. Oh, nice. Cool.
I did put it on the channel.
Oh, yeah. No. I just mean like forcing. Yeah, right. You're doing your job for sure. Like, I just mean, and actually you're doing it right here. You're like, hey, forcing everyone to look at it, which is good, which is like, it's a liability if we don't collectively. And so this is great. If you all would, like the overarching concern, I think for this area is kind of like, it's kind of like air-gapped deployments, sort of I don't know if that's the best term, but there's a lot of considerations within there. And as an area of concern, it drives caching manifests, it drives rate limiting concerns, excuse me. And so if you would try to tie those together, creating hyperlinks between the docs and things, so that we can get a holistic picture. And the reason being is like, is that there are any number of snafus, kind of gotchas in something as complex now as it is Meshery CTL, where if you, like, it's easy to get yourself into a catch-22 and you just become deadlocked. You deploy with one version on one channel, you switch the channels, change the version, try to then stop the other. Like it's easy to get to end up in a place where you don't have the correct manifests available to you. And so we have to write down the use cases, like the starting points. So user is running the latest version, then they start it, then they restart it, then they stop it, then they delete it, then they switch to it. Like we have to write down each and every one of those system flows, those user flows, and make sure that they get addressed, or that they are addressed by the design. The design might address all of them, and that's wonderful. We just have to do the diligence of writing it down. So it's good. So I'm, for my part, it puts me slightly on edge to merge the PR without, like, it is probably just churn. That's actually one thing I wanted to convey to, I think, all of us, is there's a number of users who are getting busy with Meshery, and they are running into any number of bugs. And that doesn't mean that any of you are, including myself, are doing are doing anything wrong. It's part and parcel to writing one line of code. Like, there's inevitably a bug in that line. It's just kind of the way it is. But anyway, so at some point we need to congeal the features that are there, harden them a bit, and the unit tests that you all are speaking to is wonderful in that regard. There's a number of integration tests. There's a number of, but Meshery, like the CNCF webinar that'll be happening tomorrow, folks are becoming hip to the fact that there's this pretty cool project happening over here. And I got to tell you, I don't know that all of you have heard this story, but it was Samir and I were going to present to the CNCF Service Mesh Working Group a week ago. And I woke up that morning groggy, completely having forgot that was actually today or that day. So there's 20 to 30 end user, large enterprise organizations that are part of the CNCF that focus on service mesh specifically because they're running service meshes. We're asking for a presentation of Meshery and of SMP, and so we gave it to them. And then they held me on the line for an additional 30 minutes after that hour-long call because they had so many darn questions, especially when they saw a mesh map. They just, soiled themselves, I think, was sort of what happened. And I wish that, and that's the kind of feedback that I wish for all of you to receive directly. It's no joke what you're working on. But I also got feedback from others that, and these are, principal architects. These are folks that know what they're doing. I just couldn't get the thing working. And they're referring to Meshery itself. Or like they ran into so many, they ping-ponged around different bugs. And it's like, ugh. So we'll have to reel in the quality. So I gave that as a backdrop to saying, I don't know that we should merge that IDD. Not that it isn't necessarily, I barely even know what it is. I'm just using it as an example of like, if we know that we need a design spec for something, it's like, let's chew through that and hopefully have less churn. And there's time and place, by the way, for rip-roaring through code, which is what we've mostly been doing. Especially if you look at the number of commits that Aditi has in particular. I was just looking at that. That's fantastic. We need to get some stuff in there, things tangible and things to use. But then, at some point we have to slow the train.
Did you mention me? I just came back. I was away from my laptop for a couple of minutes. Sorry.
It was all very flattering. So yeah, be flattered. Great, Aditi. I'm looking forward to the design spec. We'll thank you for writing one. Let's get some eyeballs on that. It looks like a lot of people have feedback in this area. As a matter of fact,
it's pretty bare bones. Implementing your version folder thing would be the next step.
There's a fine gentleman. His name's Phil Olberg. I thought I saw a message. This is really coincidental because I thought I saw a message from him in Slack yesterday, I thought. And he's the one, he works for a bank, so happens to be here in Austin, where I am. And air-gapped is what they need. Like they can't, and he doesn't particularly care how many hoops he has to jump through to deploy it air-gapped. He just needs to know what are those instructions. And that document that we have hopefully I know it calls out some already. So that's actually the starting point, is like, what are the concerns? What can a user even do if they are air gapped? In some cases, there's manual steps for them to do. Let's start there. Is a good point.
I was also thinking, could we like have selective downloads for specific adapter files? Because like that's not a complete air gap deployment, but that's reducing our dependency on, you know, the internet. Like if the user is okay using an older file for, let's say, Istio, but wants a newer one for console, they should be allowed to specify that with the adapters flag.
It's a good thing to put there. I would open an issue and start a discussion. But yeah.
Okay.
I think that to give you quick feedback is like, there are more egregiously outstanding things to go chase after before that, like
Yes.
even supporting multiple versions. Like today, if you go try to deploy a service mesh, embarrassingly, Meshery doesn't even give you the choice of what version you want to deploy. It's like, oh my gosh, we regressed in functionality there. But we're well positioned to blow past what we were offering previously. Previously, it was a bunch of sort of hard-coded support for hard-coded versions. Anymore, Rudraksh and Shreyas and Shayatan and Ashish, and there's a list of folks that have been working on making that very dynamic, making it so it's a bit self-sustaining, and that there'll be a long history, a long list of individual version numbers that every service mesh would support, or adapter would support.
Okay.
We want to get to that first and then start to iterate on top of that, where people can then selectively, choose what to. The adapters will come pre-bundled with support for as many as we can stuff in there, because the support itself is extremely small in terms of footprint. The actual binaries and the images that will be installed to run the mesh, those are still stored separately and produced by that service mesh project. The manifests, though, that are used to install them, that's what will be cached inside of the adapter.
Okay.
Cool. So it's a whole, I need to be quiet and let you guys go to the next topic. Like, it's a whole separate thing. That Rudraksh, by the way, if that's not written down, we should write that down.
There was another discussion around the current charts, right? Moving away from manifest, and so that also we should think about.
For those that didn't hear Husseina, she was highlighting the notion that we would like to congeal on use of Helm charts as the manifest by which service meshes are installed, and not directly, literally, the Kubernetes manifest. So, for a number of reasons, that's a great call out, Husseina, and yeah, should be accounted for as we discuss this. If we wrap a lot of extra caching support around individual manifest files, and then we go to swap that out with charts, like, now is the time to account for that. So.
Thank you, Aditi. Thanks, Lee. So we will iterate upon spec. So moving on to the next topic, Piyush, would you like to give a quick review of the command tracker and the reworking of the API endpoints?
Okay, I'll share my screen. I hope it's visible. Okay, what
Yes.
we are doing right now is we are checking how much we are ready to release O.6. Let's go to the sheet. Okay, many commands have been added to Meshery CTL from last 2 months. One of them is Meshery CTL check. These 3 flags are added to it and 2 are still pending. So if anyone wants to contribute here, most welcome. Okay, let's move to second command that is added to Meshery, that is perf. And almost everything is working and has been added to perf. One thing that is not working correctly is the file thing. It is being fixed by multiple people, so I think it will be eventually fixed very soon. In the mesh command, I can see validate views pending, deploy, and apply. So these two are still areas to be worked upon. In patterns, everything is working seamlessly. In app, Suhani added all the features recently. And in filters, we have list and view working, and apply and delete are still pending because we do not have the server ready to handle these two things. Once we will have those, then we will work on adding these two commands. Okay, so this was the review of Meshery commands. Now let's move to the reworking of Meshery server endpoints. Okay, so this amazing sheet has all the older endpoints and all the newer endpoints right here. Most of them have been changed. If like many of you must be aware of it, because I'm using a new PR each week, I guess. And only 2 things are remained: filter and the mesh manage. Oops, the PRs have been already raised. So let's see when will this whole column will be green. Okay, that's it, I guess.
Thank you for the update, Piyush. Looks good. It's nice that we are almost done with reworking the API endpoints as well. And as Piyush mentioned, the areas that are not green in this spreadsheet are potential areas to work on in Meshery CTL. So reach out to Piyush and jump on it. Piyush, if you could share the link to spreadsheet in the chat, it would be great. So moving on to the next topic, Samir, would you like to talk about some concepts in Meshery UI?
Yes, so I have some of the questions. Maybe if anybody has any important thing, maybe they can finish because my list is quite long.
We can maybe stay back after the call and discuss that, or catch up on Slack, I guess.
Yes, but the few things to say, let me share my screen for quick. Okay, so one thing. Okay, so few thing to know that. So my Prometheus, like it gives this kind of error when I refresh my page. But when I click this, it says Prometheus successfully pinged, which tells me that this IP is not persistent. The same goes with Grafana. So if I just give Grafana to connect, and so it says there are some error connecting this. 1 second. Yeah, so something like this. So now if I just go to Prometheus, we saw it was connected, but when I go here, it still says error communicating Prometheus. And the same thing, there are few things with filters and patterns, which actually I wanted to discuss. So just wanted to know from where I get all this? Like, is it from Meshery server or is it from my cluster, or how does it here? And the same goes for filters also. And
Yeah, that's it. Those last two. So those last two questions are good questions of like Meshery is, it highlights the fact that Meshery is a platform that is extensible, that you can bring your own content to, that in some areas we would do well to seed content and provide sort of out of the box, readily available filters, a couple of readily available patterns, those that we know that many might like to use. There's been a little bit of discussion about how to do that with filters in the Monday meetings on WebAssembly filters. There isn't.
And the patterns, like, here, if I see go in patterns, now if I upload, it really doesn't tell me which kind of files I can upload. So is there a good way to, like, give an indication that, or can do a US side validation if whatever I'm uploading is a proper one, or give some indication, maybe just YAML or JSON? Or
Yeah, or a bit of, yeah, that's good feedback. I mean, patterns are an emerging concept in Meshery, and there's a lack of context for what the heck the user is supposed to do. And like, a set of examples, a bit of like a bit of an in-project tour, of like, hey, this is your first time here. Would you like a small tour of like what the heck this is and what you're supposed to do? And especially if it's seeded with some content, that's helpful.
okay, and does this pattern, like, are specific to any of the service mesh, or it is independent? Like, I have installed Istio, so are those pattern files which are being displayed here, so are those valid for all the service mesh, or it is specific?
I think actually I thought you were asking a rhetorical question for a second, to say like, hey, the user can't necessarily, or like you in this case, you can't necessarily, you weren't being rhetorical. You're actually asking like, great, I see when it was uploaded and when it was last updated. Okay, and then some other name that of what I'm looking at, I have no idea what those are. It's like, yeah, in general, the concept is that users themselves will be creating these, whether they're visually designing them using MeshMap, or whether they are grabbing a set of YAML, like pre-existing patterns, maybe as starting points that they can augment. So there's a lot more, documentation to come forth about.
Okay, and I just tried out MeshMap, and I don't get this working, so I'll be reaching out to.
Nice, yeah. I saw that too. The thing that you saw about Prometheus and the error coming back, I'm seeing the same thing, ran into it a lot yesterday. It looks like there's a recent change where two things are not happening. One is that if you have Prometheus and Grafana deployed, MeshSync will identify those, and the Prometheus, the metrics dropdowns in the settings page should be pre-populated with links to them. They should actually auto connect if you only have one reference to Prometheus, one reference to Grafana. Meshery should auto connect, auto register.
And from here, if I just want to go to Prometheus, like, is it possible to go there? Just
right. Yeah, that makes sense. That's a good ask. So the ask is like, hey, can we have it's nice that you can do the ad hoc connectivity test. Good, Meshery can talk to Prometheus. Okay, now what? Now I'd like to look at Prometheus. Is there a link? Can you provide a convenient link? And you can see the URL. It's like, so yeah, an external link to open up Prometheus. It's sounds about right.
yeah, like, that dashboard where I can see that actually. So like from here, how can I go to the dashboard wherein the Grafana dashboard shows in Meshery UI?
Right. If you, once Grafana is connected, there is a set of, in settings under metrics, you can add any number of boards, any number of panels, but it's only there after Grafana is connected.
So from here, I cannot see the Grafana dashboard. So I have to go to here in these to see the metrics. So is that okay?
So yeah, so that's a bug, like that error communicating with Prometheus that needs to be fixed. But it's only after you connect Grafana that you would then be able to manipulate. Well, actually, that's not true, actually. I guess, yeah, if you take definition of, yeah, actually, this is funny. I've not seen a user get this far in a long time. So this is great. If you add that, down below, do you see, it's not, yeah, but anyway, you would see charts here.
Okay.
After you get Grafana connected, I think you'll have a bit more success.
Yes. So that is all like high level. So I'll just message in Slack and guess I get it.
This is great. Yeah, please do. Yeah, these need to be focused on.
And
it's really powerful.
One thing is this map which I see here, is it the mesh map?
No, it's just a refinement of the Prometheus query.
Okay. So now if I go to Prometheus, see it says not able to connect. After some time, yeah, once I do this, it says.
Yep. Nitish, is this something that you might be able to look at?
Yeah, I will look into it. Like, I don't think it, there must be something wrong with the logic here. I'll take a look at it.
Nice. And Samir, if you can, do try to connect Grafana, and I think you'll have more success.
Yes. Okay. Thank you.
Also, to add a few things, the different patterns and filters you were seeing it because now, since your account is as part of the program itself, you have access to all the public filters, patterns, and performance. So that's why we were seeing them for the first season. And sorry about mesh map. Actually, yesterday we were trying to debug the rate limiting thing, and in that case, there were a lot of unwanted packages which we released. So we will fix that soon. Sorry for that. Yeah.
Hey, it's okay. No, sorry. This is the feature we do work on. So thanks.
Thanks, Amir. Thanks, Dhruv. So we'll be covering a couple of more topics today. So please stick around if you'd like to listen to it and see some demos. Otherwise, thank you for joining, and we'll see you tomorrow in the SMP meeting or Friday on the community meeting. And if you are new here, you can jump in the newcomers meeting that happens tomorrow as well. Moving on to the next topic, Nikhil, would you like to talk about the snack bar update and possibly demo it?
Nitish, can we maybe first talk about the messing in NAT server?
Yeah, we can. Should I share my screen? So as we discussed in the last meeting, like the plan was to have a way to deploy meshing and connect to NATs manually if the user wants to. In some cases, if the deployment or the connection is not automatically done. So that was what we were planning to do. And to take a step towards that, we have implemented this thing that we right now have 2 chips, but the functionality of this chips is that if it is already connected, it would on clicking on mesh sync, it would actually try to redeploy the mesh sync deployment, and in case of NATs, it will try to reconnect to the NAT server. Okay, so I have some problem with my cluster. That is why it's not working. Just before this, it was working fine. So, but the functionality is basically working, but I'm not able to demo it right now. That's the issue. And yeah, so this meshing will actually redeploy the whole meshing deployment if you press on it, and then the NATs will actually try to connect to the NATs broker again if there's a problem with that. Or basically, it doesn't actually do it all the time. It will first check if it is already connected or not, and if it is not, then it will try to reconnect. Yeah, Dhruv, you have something to add to this?
Yeah, so also the state which NATs have, we have added one more state, basically disabled, active, and connected, because those 3 are different, and usually some people are stuck where the NATs is not connected and they want to connect it by themselves. So they can see over here that it's not connected and they can connect it. The UI is temporary for now. Maybe we can add green for the final states. I don't know. That's just the idea floating in my head. Other than that, we also have a processing scroll bar now. So whenever Meshery operator, when we turn on or off the switch, it will.
That's actually, there's some problem with it right now. That's why we are not able to see it.
So is it running or not?
No, it's not working. I mean, it's not able to connect to the server itself. Like I was actually playing with the deployments. I was trying to delete them, and I was not able to get them back. So actually, right now, a broker is not connected. Nothing is actually connected right now, but yeah.
Wait, what? If you click on operator, it should update, man.
And to the same line, actually, Meshery system start doesn't download all the deployment files sometimes. So,
Okay.
So
yes, so it happened twice yesterday. So what I did, so the third time when I downloaded this thing, so I saved those manifest and just applied with kubectl apply.
Manifest for specifically?
In .meshery folder in the in manifest folder, it just show only 2 files most of the time. So which are just like just v1 and Meshery sync and operator, just 2 files I can see sometimes. And when I try for the third time, then I got all the files like service deployment, default, everything.
Yeah, so basically you're saying that the broker is not deployed.
Not deployed. So in Meshery CTL system start, it first downloads everything, right? All the manifest from a tag. So sometime it doesn't download all the manifest.
Okay.
Yes. Exactly. We saw this in the bug hunt. That is why in the bug hunt, I was not able to delete the deployment. Then I did it again and all the deployment got downloaded. So what exactly we have to do is once we install this with Meshery CTL system start, we particularly have to maybe validate whether all the manifest got downloaded or not. Then we apply those. But if we do it from Helm, then it is fine.
Yeah, and maybe that was a rate limiting issue at the time. It kind of goes hidden sometimes. But okay, so that's potentially part of the issue. The other part of the issue, and part of the reason that we'd like to shift to only using Helm charts is sustaining 2 different things. So the Kubernetes manifest, the direct manifest that we have to install Meshery today, articulate and characterize a Meshery deployment. And then so too does a set of charts that we have. Well, that's just two separate things to sustain and make sure that they're right. Doing it in just one spot. So the manifests don't have different configuration settings for Meshery deployment than the charts do. That's another issue that could have affected what was going on.
Yeah. And I think as a part of release artifacts, right? So we are releasing dot all the Meshery CTL executables. In that case, can we also export the Meshery camel files? So it does go and download it from there, maybe just a thought. So,
You're hitting it right on the head, Samir. I think Husseina, I don't know if you want to speak to that, but that's an active consideration on an open PR that she has.
oh, okay. I'm sorry for that.
I think Rudraksh had the same comment.
So I think that's like a 2 + 1s and Altos and a +1. Yeah, the initial bundle right now, when you go to download Meshery CTL, you go to kind of download Meshery, you really just need to grab Meshery CTL and it'll take you from there. Although, except in the case where you're in air gap deployment or where you're dealing with GitHub rate limiting things, maybe you should be, it's not just Meshery CTL that should be downloaded, but a bundle of templates and manifests. So this is a good example as to why it is that a design spec needs to be written, that one-off myopic consideration to how functionality is implemented does us a disservice. So holistic consideration put into that design spec with a bunch of comments, like from Samir as well, is going to inspire confidence. It'll be good. Yeah, I think we should do what you're suggesting, Samir, for my part.
Thank you.
Nitish, would you like to call out the other topic as well? Yeah.
Yeah, sure. Regarding this, we'll connect and try to get this thing working. Okay, so regarding the next thing, like we actually have an open proposal for some changes for state management in Meshery UI. And if you can look in the meeting minutes, you'll have the link for the proposal. You can actually, you can feel free to go and take a look at it and suggest something, like if you have any reviews to it, or if you want to add something to it, or whatever the opinions that you have, you're welcome to put it over there. We can have a discussion as well as to so basically that it is about the whole state management. The state of state management in Meshery UI currently is not it's not very efficient. There are some problems that I addressed in the proposal as well. So it will clearly explain things what are the problems that you're trying to solve. So yeah, that's what I wanted to call out.
Thank you, Nidesh. I have shared the link to the spec in the comments. Moving on to the next topic, Gaurav, would you like to show your updates in? Yeah.
Share my screen.
Yeah, sure.
So regarding the latest update, we have in the patterns plus the application deleting with the single select in the UI. So the UI is okay, it's running. Okay, so we can just select any of the. I'm doing it for the application. The same will work for the patterns as well. And we'll click on this, and this thing will get deleted. Okay, sorry, my Meshery server was running from more than an hour ago. Maybe I need to refresh that thing. Reload. Yeah. So when you click on any of the applications and select delete, So this thing gets deleted successfully, and we can verify that when I refresh this thing. Yeah, it's not there. It's making a perfect request to the API. And one thing to the addition of that, so today Lee was referring to that we cannot add the screen. Yeah, so in reference to that, Lee was mentioning that we are not able to upload two type of application with the same file name as well as the same name. So, but okay, 1 minute. That thing is there. We are able to upload the two applications with the same file name. So I have just added that thing. So that is there.
Nice, Gaurav. Did you just make that change?
No. That was already there. I didn't make any changes for that thing. It is accepting both the files.
Gotcha.
I tested
Okay.
that out.
Got you. Okay. Thank you, Ashish. Please get some rest. But Gaurav, to re-characterize the challenge is if we are being smart and introspecting the name that's included inside the application file. And so what else? If you take the same file and upload it.
Okay.
What am I trying to say? I think you could take if you take a file, a YAML file, you have a name like this. You leave the same name in two different files.
Okay, I can just demo this right now.
Okay.
Let's first delete both of the files with the same name and re-upload that thing. You can go and again same file. Okay. Why delete? It was uploading earlier. Yeah, it got uploaded. And we refresh it. Yeah, it is uploaded with the same file.
Can you do that same? Please don't do it now. But can you do? That's good. I think that's the desired behavior that because what we want to use as a unique identifier for a given entity, for a given. What's a better word? I don't know. Anyway, entity in the system is an ID behind the system, so or within the system. Can you do the same thing for a pattern? That might be what I'm thinking of rather than the applications. Okay. I don't remember. But maybe if you would test that out later after the call.
Yeah, I will just test it out later after the call. Sure.
Oh, thank you. Nice. All right. Do we have anything else?
Utkarsh has a topic. Thank you, Gaurav.
Yeah, so I just have some quick updates. Let me share my screen. So basically, earlier pattern support was available only in the ST adapter, but I have recently created a PR in OSM adapter, which basically adds support for patterns in OSM adapter. There are some more changes in OSM adapter, but they are not specific to patterns. The second thing is that I've also added support for the same in Linkerd. Right now, it's a draft PR. The reason is that this particular PR is sort of relying on this PR, which is on Meshery. What I'm proposing in Meshery is right now we have a apply manifest function in Meshery, what it does is you can, basically it's a sort of like kubectl apply. So you can give it any manifest and it will apply all of them one by one. The issue that we were encountering was that Linkerd installation was failing. The reason was that one of the CRD were not actually getting deployed. The reason was Kubernetes API was refusing it to deploy. The reason was that it was not fitting the schema. So if you would actually, instead of applying, basically instead of deploying Linkerd from Meshery adapter, if you would do the same with kubectl, what will happen is that it will deploy all of the resources which are basically perfectly fine, and will leave basically the one which was actually erroneous. So that's the same thing that I'm proposing to add in this particular function. That is, I'm proposing to add one more flag so that the default behavior doesn't change. But if a adapter opts in, so basically the proposal is to add this flag, ignore errors. If this is true, then what it will do is it will go ahead and try to apply all of the manifest. If any manifest application results in an error, it will skip that and move ahead instead of throwing error right away. So basically this fixes Linkerd deployment issue. At the same time, it is also more like kubectl. So maybe it is more intuitive as compared to what we had earlier. The default behavior stays while I'm proposing to add a new flag. This particular PR is actually blocking this one. That's why actually it's marked draft. As soon as this one gets merged, we have support for patterns in Linkerd. And as soon as this one gets merged, which is not blocked, it can be merged after review. We will have support for OSM in patterns, which includes support for core OSM resources, as well as installation of OSM service mesh and sidecar injection, those kind of things. All of them are actually in this PR. So these were the quick updates. Another thing is that there's call for volunteers. So we have already added, I should say Rudraksh and Sindhan have already added support for, basically they have already added workload definitions and those kind of things, which you can actually see. So yeah, they have added workload definitions and all in Kuma adapter. So this is called for volunteer, that if someone wants to propagate pattern support in Kuma adapter, they can just go ahead and do so. How would you proceed? Actually, you can basically refer this particular PR, what this PR is doing. This PR is achieving exactly the same. The changes that you would have to do in Kuma adapter would be very similar to what the changes have been in Meshery OSM adapter. So if anyone is interested, they can ping me and we can probably create an issue, or maybe I'll basically guide you how you can actually proceed ahead with the process. So this was update and call for volunteer. If anyone has.
Quick question, is the thought that, well, the ignore flag or the force flag, maybe, sort of maybe one and the same, that be potentially exposed to the user in the UI should they want to take their life into their own hands?
Yeah, no, actually it's more about, and so no, so right now we have only 3 flags in, so no, it won't be available to the user. It's more of availability to the developer. So right now we have these 3 things: namespace, update, and delete. I'm just adding one more, ignore errors, because I know that these installations sometimes errors out. And even without that CRD, so actually one thing actually goes into crash back off loop. But other than that, actually installation succeeds. The same result is also produced if you would actually go with kubectl installation. So the thing is that, so it's more of, we can say that, hey, we proceeded with the deployment. Now it's a Linkerd's issue because they have something messed up in the CRD.
Yeah, that's the bane of management software's existence. If you're using Meshery and there's a bug in Open Service Mesh, well, to the user, it looks like Meshery doesn't work. Well, that's true. Meshery doesn't work only because Open Service Mesh doesn't work. And actually, impressively, if you try to go install Open Service Mesh, you can't. Not through Meshery, I just mean straight up through OSM, which is, I don't know if it's comforting that other large projects have egregious bugs as well, but they do. And No, but the hair, the single hair that continues to stand up on the back of my neck about the ignore errors isn't that there is ignore errors. Like that sounds like an entirely appropriate behavior to enhance and add. So I think this is net positive. It is the hard coding and lack of, and the point in time decision of a developer of an adapter contributor to determine when it is that would be appropriate for what version to ignore. And it's like, well, good, except it's going to require a code change anyway by someone to flip on the ignore flag because someone reported a bug that OSM actually isn't installed. And it's like, well, like, maybe it could be a lot more valuable if that control is exposed.
Yeah, actually, we can expose it. But the reason I haven't exposed it, so definitely we can do it via patterns, but that's a caveat that we can expose it only via patterns. So definitely when we have new management UI, you would have access to that thing in the UI, but with the current UI, it won't be very explicit to the user unless until they are writing pattern for deploying linked service mesh or any service mesh.
Nice, cool, that's great. Now, for those that, by the way, just a quick note that like getting each of these adapters supporting pattern-based operations, like the call for help on Kuma, that's wonderful. If you are raising your hand there, please note that you will be hounded to execute. And if you're raising your hand, don't. This isn't the time for you to be taught and trained. There's tons of time for that. We spend a ton of time training people, teaching people on like all the time, which is why there's lots of people here in part. But know what you're signing up for, I guess is what I'm saying. So if you're, yeah. Fair warning. You are fair game if you're signing up for it. Not that you won't be supported. I just mean, please don't pick up the issue and then turn around and say, okay, what do I do? Because that will be a swift virtual smack on the wrist. Cool. All right. Any other topics today?
All right. Thank you everyone for joining. We'll see you next time. Bye.
Bye, folks.
Bye, everyone.
Well, thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.